Thank you, Lord. You know, that song had such a special meaning to me. It really takes me back to 22 years ago when God began to move on Amy and I's heart to serve and to serve in ministry. And God gave me such a revelation that every breath we take, I mean, do you realize the ancient name for God is just an exhale? Yeah. So basically, every time you take a breath, you're worshiping God. So if someone comes up to you and says they're a complete atheist, and they're breathing and they're telling you that, they're worshiping God. Every time you use your breath to say something you shouldn't, that is a breath that you should be worshiping God with. But sometimes the enemy will take that and twist it. So every exhale, every breath. And I remember that was an exciting time because it was such a new thing just to become a believer at that time. Amy and I had moved to England and everything was so new to us. We've been raised in religion our whole lives. But it was in that season of our life where we actually were introduced to the Holy Spirit. The breath of God. We knew about God. We tried to worship God and we tried to serve God as best we could to our knowledge. But the only knowledge we had was out of religion. The only knowledge we had is the do's and the don'ts. Thou shalt not. But when God began to develop us into a new creature, it was a creature that was built to worship. It was a creature that was built that every breath comes out of our mouth should exalt the Father. It was built to know that the same breath that was breathed into the nostrils of Adam is the same breath we breathe. The same breath that came back into Lazarus when he was raised from the dead. Same breath. The same breath that Christ took in and exhaled and inhaled once again on the third day. Same breath. So just breathe it in. Just do that. Just write it. 1, 2, 3. Just go. You just said the ancient name of God. God meant it for good. How many times in your life has things happened to you and you were ready to kind of give up in the process, but you realize that you get that wow moment where you realize in hindsight's a great view. You know, it's 20/20 all the time. And I wish that sometimes I could see things in the foresight that I could see as well in the hindsight. If we could, we would all be really wise people, wouldn't we? We would all be probably very prosperous at times. But there are times where we have to ask ourselves, what if what you had in mind is not what God had in store for you? That's a statement. I don't know about you, but I can say probably 99% of the time when things unfold, it probably didn't happen exactly the way I had it envisioned. You ever gone into a situation and you had it all worked out in your mind how this is going to take place, and you're going to do this, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this, and then when it's all said and done, you're like, okay, that did not happen nowhere near like I thought it was going to. Those are the times that are the toughest in our lives. I'm going to talk a little bit about Joseph, and you probably know where I'm going. Go over to Genesis 37. I'm going to jump through about 4 or 5 chapters here really quick. But I just want to speak in this. Genesis 37, anybody there? Joseph was loved by his father more than all of his sons, and his brothers hated him for that. Wow. Let me just give you a clue real quick. The enemy hates you because the Father loves you. Just boil it down to simplicity. You're going through a lot of things in your life and have gone through the attacks because the enemy hates you because God loves you. God so loved the world, everyone, that He gave up His only Son. He so loved you. And the enemy hates that. I was reading about a man of God that basically had prophesied to Edom. Edom was actually the descendants of Esau. Esau's descendants were still in a tipped-off mode because of the birthright that was taken from them that Jacob took. Generation after generation, because of what had happened to them, they got bitter and bitter and bitter and bitter to the point where they were sabotaging men and women of God that were trying to do God's will. Until one day a prophet came along and prophesied complete destruction on them. See, sometimes your enemy can get away with it for a little while, but you got to know that one day their time will be up. Satan knows that one day his time's up. But when things happen to us and we go through things, we can either get bitter or we can get better. That's the only choices we got. After 22 years of serving in ministry, my wife and I have had many opportunities to get bitter. And I wish to say that we passed the test on every one of those. Sometimes there's seasons where you'll go through and you're just bitter instead of being better. Sometimes it takes years to walk that out. He was so loved by his father that his brothers hated him. His father even gave him a coat of many colors and set him apart. It showed everyone just how special he was to his father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age. Also, he made him a tunic of many colors, but when his brothers saw that, the father loved him more than all of his brothers. They hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. So you know why the enemy hates the birthright so much? Because you have a God-given birthright mandated from heaven that you have a future and a hope. You have a birthright that's going to enter you into the kingdom of heaven if you receive it. Satan hates that so much because no matter what he can do, how bad he tries, he will never have a birthright. It's already been settled. He has no inheritance in the kingdom of God. And when people get bitter, they just as soon make other people bitter. You ever see that? People get around them. You get around them, you know what they're like. In order to make their candle look like it's burning brighter, they'll just try to make yours snuffed out. They can just blow out your candle, then they'll feel a whole lot better about their little flickering one. Hurt people hurt people. That's true. I think everybody knows that. Now Joseph had a dream. And see, this says if he wasn't hated enough. And he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. As if it couldn't get worse. So he said to them, please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There were binding sheaves in the field, and then behold, my sheaf rose and also stood upright, and indeed your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to mine. And his brothers said to him, shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us? So they hated him even more for the dreams and for his words. And if it didn't deter him enough, what happens? Then he dreamed still another dream. Listen, I don't know. We are definitely, if you could label this church anything, it's probably a dreamer church. We are dreamers. Amy and I have had in the last 3 years probably 7 dreams that have been identical. I have never dreamed so much as when we entered into to take this church. There is a season of dreaming upon the church again. And the enemy hates dreams. Why? Because dreams birth forth promises, and promises are established in the kingdom. And the enemy can't stand that. Because again, he has no promises. Except for one. That one day it'll be up. And he'll be done forever. That's the one promise that will be carried out. So he still dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, look, I have dreamed another dream. And at this time the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowed down to me. So he told it to his father and his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you? And his brothers envied him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Now his father wasn't a dumb man, but he realized, okay, if God's given him these dreams, there's probably something more to it than what I understand. Then his brothers went to feed the father's flock in Shechem, and Israel and Joseph. And Israel said to Joseph, are not your brothers feeding the flock of Shechem? Come, and I will send you to them. So he said to him, here I am. Now, I talked a bit about this in a previous sermon about here I am and here am I. You will see 2 different statements, and this will give you an idea of where Joseph's life is. Whenever you hear someone say, here I am, that's basically saying, here I am, I'm the answer, I'm here, it's me, it's all about me, it's I can do this. But you will actually see that change in a lot of people's lives. When Samuel was called to be a prophet, he actually said, here am I. You've got to flip it and understand it's a mirror image of the I am. You'll catch that. So you will see later when the whole process goes all the way to the very end, Joseph then says, when Pharaoh brings him out of the dungeon, and you know the story, his response is, I don't have it in me, but God does. He's no longer an I am, he's an am I. But there's a process in between the beginning and the end that God has to take us through. And I will tell you that 90% of the circumstances you go through and the problems and the issues in life is more about your attitude and what God is trying to bring to the surface in your life than it is about what's happening. I will tell you almost every time, it is more about your response to the situation than it is about what's actually happening. There will come a time when you enter into the gates of heaven and a lot of the stupid stuff that we deal with, that stuff's over. And you will find that none of it made a difference. There had to be a development from Joseph to get to where he was going to be the man of the God that he was to be, and he was to fulfill the dream that was on his life. But Joseph was 17 years old. He was young. He was arrogant in it. He heard from God, given him special dreams. His father loved him best, got the special coat. He set aside. Yeah, he became a target. But then out of his attitude, because he was bragging about it to his brothers and telling them how one day they're going to bow to him. You've got to see behind the scenes. You can't fault him. He was excited. I remember when God first developing that in us, 24 years ago, when God first started speaking to Amy and I about us being in ministry. 24 years ago. And then God began to birth forth and speak to us in His Word, and then He started giving us dreams. Now, we had no idea that those dreams were going to take decades to reveal. We went to England. We began to serve, became life group leaders. We served faithfully. We were excited. Again, when the enemy can't stop you, he will push you. I was convinced that we were going to get out of the military, we were coming back to the States, and it was just going to be on like Donkey Kong. We were just going to step foot and I am has arrived. It's about to get some of this dream on. Yeah, didn't you know I'm something? God showed me I'm something. Oh, you didn't get the memo? Oh, okay. Well, get out of my way. Isn't that how it is? So Joseph had to go through the process. The moment his brothers, and he sent him out to the field, the brothers saw him coming from afar, they said, oh, it's time to do something with this kid. He needs to come down a few notches. Next thing you know, he finds himself in a pit looking up at the 11. Wait a minute, God, these were the 11 stars that were going to bow down to me, and now I'm looking up at them from a pit. For you to get where you need to be, you're going to have to encounter betrayal. I'm not going to candy coat it. Joseph was betrayed many times, in many ways. Since in 22 years of ministry, I can't count the number of times that we have felt betrayed. Joseph was just betrayed by his flesh and blood. Probably even felt a sense of betrayal by his father because he got rebuked. Now he's sitting in a pit and he's probably feeling like the dreams that God just gave him betrayed him. Wait a minute, God, this is not how I had it planned. Then he gets sold into slavery and sent to serve the Potiphar's house. And he does it faithfully. And every step of the way, there's a statement that says, and the Lord was with him. His hand was upon him. His hand upon you doesn't always mean you're going to be in complete freedom. That means you're going to be led. Peter said in the very end, he was actually told to Peter that when you were young, you did what you wanted to do, but when you're old, Amy just gave me that today, this morning, talking to her. But when you're old, the Spirit of God is going to lead you to places you don't want to go. The hand of God will lead you sometimes to things that you just don't like doing. You may not be happy about it. You ever try to drag a kid kicking and screaming into something, even though you know it's going to be good for him, like the doctor? Sometimes your hands got to be upon him. It took 4 of us to wrestle Max down when he got a shot. This is a Marine, okay? He went to the Marine Corps, and I swear it was a holy carnage every time he went to the medical place. And they were giving him a shot. He was screaming, hiding under tables. He looked like a wild banshee. Yeah, this is when he was little, not when he was just older. I don't want you to get that and think, oh my gosh. No, it's when he was little. That's why it was shocking he became a Marine. Especially joining the military, because if you don't like needles, do not join the military. Because they'll get you both coming and going. You walk through a door, you'll get it in both arms at the same time. You don't even see it coming. They use guns. Pa-pow! Pa-pow! You don't even see it coming. 20 shots later, you don't even know what they just shot you with. But sometimes there's things that are good for us that we kick and scream the whole way. But God's got a bigger plan. But he was faithful. And God blessed everything he put his hand to. Why? Because he didn't get bitter. He got better. Even though he knew the dream wasn't speaking true at this point, he knew that God's hand was upon him and he had to be faithful with what he was given, even if it was a little. Oh, but then here comes the testing of a heart again, and Potiphar's wife made moves on him. And it said she did it repeatedly. This wasn't a one-time thing, and he resisted her over and over and over until finally she just lied about him. So now he's finding himself, now not only has his brothers betrayed him, has he felt like the dream has betrayed him, now he feels like that even where he's working has betrayed him. The people he's been serving now faithfully for years just betrayed him and put him off into the king's prison. And I like that because you think you're going through something because you messed up, or maybe you're going through something because God doesn't like you anymore. But I'm telling you, he's positioned you in a place and he will put you in the king's prison for such a time as this. How else can a man go from the pit to the palace unless betrayal had to be the price? How else can a king become the king of kings unless betrayal had to be the price? So now he finds himself in prison. And again it says the hand of the Lord was upon him. And he began to serve faithfully. Matter of fact, it said he was the head of the king's guard there. He actually would head servant for all of them. Matter of fact, it said the head guard, the warden basically, said he didn't even look at anything Joseph did because he knew he did it right. So here comes the baker and the butler on the scene. I have a dream. Well, that's probably the last thing Joseph wanted to hear about was a dream. Yeah, I had a dream too. And it ain't been working out too well. And one, he had to interpret the dream. And then after he was to get out, one was killed and one was put back into Pharaoh's service. Actually, exactly how the dream spoke. But then it's funny, something funny happened. You would think that now he's interpreted this dream and it just happened and he just prophesied something that just happened within 3 days. And then it said, and then he's sent for 2 more years in jail. Oh my gosh. So now he's not only feeling betrayed by his family, his job, the people he has served, he now just got betrayed probably by 2 guys he probably became friends with because he's hanging out in prison with. And it said that he didn't remember him until 2 years later when Pharaoh has a dream. Oh, then he remembered. So listen, you may think that you're gone and forgotten and that dream is dried up, shriveled away, and dust. But God can resurrect that dream. He can resurrect that vision that God has put on your life in an instant. 22 years went by from the time that the brothers threw him in a pit and he's looking up at the 11 to the time the 11 are bowed down to him, looking up to him. 22 years went by before that dream was fulfilled. Been 22 years. This is a season for dreams to be fulfilled. Some of you have been holding on to some dreams for a long time. You've had dreams in your heart for a long time, but you didn't see half of them. They haven't failed you. 22 years, he could have gotten bitter. 22 years, he could have been bitter at his brothers and carried that bitterness back over into the way he served Potiphar's house. And now he's serving there, but he didn't take it. He didn't allow the bitterness to take him. He began to serve faithfully. He could have taken the bitterness of being betrayed there into the prison and not served faithfully there, but he still served faithfully. Because each time he looked for the opportunity to keep being better and not bitter. Did he know how the dream was going to work out? I guarantee you he didn't have a clue until Pharaoh finally summoned him out of the prison. And even then, probably was a little skittish of, is this real? God always has a plan. What we think is going to happen may not always be what's going to happen. But I can promise you the dream that God has given you will happen. It just may not happen in the way you think it's going to. When God began to use us 22 years ago, again, we thought we had it figured out. We left England after 3 years of serving, 3 years of just being in one of the most incredible places we had been in our life. We had 3 years where we had leadership continually pouring into us, prophesying over us, sharing. They were reading our mail from the first time we visited. But then it came a test on me. And this was the test. Amy and I decided it was time for us to step out into the base chapel because we were going to teach alphas and we were going to do this on church thing. And our leaders flat out told us, we do not feel like it's God's time on your life. There's more for you to learn, and we don't agree with this. You need to stay and serve and do what you're doing. Ha! Who does he think he is? Who do they think they are? Telling us, I know I'm ready. I am ready for this. I am more than ready. I am capable. And you hear all these words people are sharing about us? It's time. Worst mistake of our lives. While we saw a little bit of fruit, it was not nowhere near what we thought it was going to be. And you know where we ended up at? Back at that church on our knees asking forgiveness from those pastors because they were looking out for our souls. There was no motivation behind what they were asking. They knew. And I never forget, it was just like I could imagine with Joseph. Joseph was sitting with his brothers bowed down before him, and this was his moment. A bitter person would have taken his power and squashed them. But a person that spoke to Pharaoh and said, it's not even in me to do it, but the Spirit of God can do it. A person that realizes they're nothing without the Father. A person that realizes, I can do nothing because I'm not the I am, that's the I am. He could have squashed him with all the power that he had. Instead, he looked up and he saw him crying and weeping bitterly. Because he took it as a possibility that he could have restoration with his family. And he had to be the bigger one to not be bitter, but be better. Had he carried that bitterness from place to place to place, he would have never seen that. I promise you. He would have never operated in authority that was given to him. You know what God does? He gives you a little bit of authority and he waits to see what you do with it. When we give people position in this church, we give them some authority and we wait to see what they do with it. We get upset and frustrated at times because attacks come. Sometimes it comes through the form of people coming into the church and causing trouble. It happens. I don't know about you, but there's no church immune from it. Because people are people. Church would be great if it wasn't for people. We can't get along. We're never in unity half the time. We have our own predetermined ideas the way things should be done. We have a lot of opinions. I'll give you a lot of opinions. Can't say they're all worth anything at times. But still, that there is a place of authority where if you learn to be an authority, no matter how small, you will be advanced to greater authority. I don't care who you are. That authority that he received when he was Pharaoh's second in command. Pharaoh was seen as God. He was a symbol of Christ, second in command. No greater power except for God. Can you see the symbolism there? So as we began to journey and try to step out, we had to ask for forgiveness and say, you know what, we're sorry, we missed it. Out of our own ambition, we were blind. That was the biggest lesson we had to learn. We had to come back, and for the rest of the few months we were there, we served them faithfully. But then we thought, okay, we've passed that test. Or we cleaned up the one we made, however you want to look at it. Sometimes you get mulligans in life. Sometimes you get to take a retest because you didn't do so great. So then as we pushed forward, we thought, oh, when we get back to the States, it's just going to be on. We're going to be ready to go. Little did we know that we were going to have to serve 16 more pastors. And I wish to say that we did them all right. I wish to say that we actually got it right every time. I wish to say that we never got bitter about a situation that God allowed into our lives. Listen, I don't care what happens. And this is the attitude I have to have. It's the attitude we have to have. It's the attitude you need to have. Whether this church succeeds, fails, or goes away, it will not change the call on my life.
That's right. Amen.
And it will not change the call on your life.
That's right.
I don't care who betrays you, how deep the betrayal. I don't care if it's a spouse. God will still fulfill what He spoke over your life.
Yes.
And there is no one person that can stop that, and not the enemy or the gates of hell can stop it either. The only time you allow the enemy to have that power is when you get bitter.
That's right.
And you carry that hurt. And it is a tough, tough thing. The hardest thing to pastor, and I'll tell you this, is to bring any form of correction. People will take all day long the wonderful words. But I couldn't imagine Jesus in His time actually spoke to His disciples and said, "Get behind me, Satan." You know what He was saying? You know what, Peter, right now your attitude sounds a whole lot like the enemy. And what's driving you is not the Spirit of God. You even say that to someone these days in a church, and you won't even finish the sentence and they'll be out the door. And I don't say that boastfully. I say that because we had to learn it the hard way. You can serve a leader that can be wrong, and you can actually not serve him faithfully, and you can be wrong. Let me give you a clue. Sometimes God will have a leader do something that is opposite of what you think and feel just to see if you will submit to it. Don't think it hasn't happened. Lou, Karen, in your life, has it ever happened?
Yeah.
Many times. Every situation you face, you need to tell yourself this. This is a test. This is just a test. How I respond in the next few minutes and how I allow my attitudes to respond will determine whether I pass or fail every time. Even if they're wrong, I can still be wrong. Joseph had so many opportunities to be that way, didn't he? Would you fault a man? Now, you got to give him some release. You know, when he first saw his brothers, he did put them through a few steps, and he did ask them to do some. He was having a little fun with it. Can you blame him? I would have. But I wish to say that I could be as good of a man as what Joseph did, because I can tell you in seasons of our life and ministry, and when it didn't happen the way we thought it was going to happen, there were times in our life where we just punched out of it. We were pastoring a church, and we didn't understand when God spoke to us and said, if you'll do what I ask you to do, you'll not lose a single one of them. We thought that meant from the church. God was meaning that from the kingdom. Because somewhere we didn't realize we don't own people. We were just stewards. And so when things didn't end the way we thought it was going to end, we allowed it to make us bitter, and we punched out and went through a 5-year season of a wilderness experience that was not fun. And the whole time, God was just like Jonah, moving that fish a little closer to where we need to be, until one day He was able to vomit us up on the land. That 5-year period for us was an attitude adjustment. That 5-year period was, it ain't about you, it's about me. And I don't care who you are, if you're going to see great dreams on your life, you're going through some seasons. You're going to go through some processes where you're ready to give up, you're ready to quit, you're ready to be done, this isn't worth it. And I am not immune to that. But you've got to dig down deep and know that this is a test. I've got to keep pushing forward. I've got to keep doing it because of the dream that God has put in my life. The dream that God has put in Amy's life. The dream that God has put in your lives. And I don't care if everyone around you, you look around, you find you're alone, it doesn't matter. I don't care if everyone has betrayed you. It doesn't matter. Joseph's a perfect example of that. to go from the pit to the palace. Only God can do that. I don't care what situation you're in. You may have found that your finances have failed you. Every time we grew up and went in church and when things failed, it was always an opportunity for God to reposition us. Back when the big economy hit, back in 06 or 04, was that 04? Somewhere around there. Doing great, finances were great. God called us to take this church over, take this place over, and we thought it was going to be something. We thought we were God's answer to that city. We have arrived. Fire up the newspapers, let them know. Yeah. That didn't happen. Then we find ourselves losing a job. We're finding not only is this ministry failing us, we're finding that even the position of finances have failed us. Went through bankruptcy, lost everything, lost a house. We've lost 3 houses now, 2 in bankruptcy and 1 in a fire. And you know what? Still got a house. And I'm better for it. So as God took us through that process, our bitterness may have positioned us to punch out, but God even used what the enemy meant to destroy us, and that bitterness moved us to the state of Florida. So even though the enemy meant it to destroy you, even though you've played into the hand and failed the test, that God is such a God that He will still take you and use that mistake and use it to propel you and move you to where you needed to be. We had told God we were not doing church no more. I'm not doing ministry no more. It's not worth it. People suck. That's how I said it. And I suck more. That's what I want as our church slogan. We suck less. Just put that out on the sign, because you know what? We're not perfect. Some days we're going to suck. But I just want to put that. We suck less. Just put it on the coffee mug. Go ahead, make t-shirts. Sylvie's like, I don't get it. Goodbye, you can tell her later. I'm not going to get into that definition. Give what's enough for the service. But only God is a God that can actually take it when you're utterly destroyed and still use it for His good. Where the enemy thought he had you, He can still bring it around for the good. Only God can actually turn a mess into a message. Turn a test into a testimony. Turn a victim into victory. Only God can do that. Only God can turn a trial into a triumph. Only God can do that. The enemy may have tried to bring the first half, but God always has the last word. Everybody stand to your feet. We had no idea what God was setting us up for. We said we would never minister again. You know, it wasn't until we got to the place where we said, God, I'll never do it again. I don't want it, is when God says, okay, I think you're finally ready. What? That was the big... And God spoke to me and He said, I had to take you all through a season where I had to burn out every ambition, every ministry ambition, everything you thought you were going to do, to the point where it made you sick and you didn't want it. Now I know you're ready. Anybody else here felt sick and tired? You might just be ready. Gideon's frustration with not seeing the miraculous like his forefathers did led him to a place of being ready. Even though he was in a pit, He took him to be something more than that, didn't He? So in that whole time, I said, God, we will never move for a church again. How about a job? Sure, I'll move for a job. Oh yeah, while you're here working, there's a church over here that needs you. That is just messed up. I mean, sometimes He's Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah Nissi, but sometimes He's straight up Jehovah Sneaky. And Jehovah Sneaky will get you doing things you said you would never do. Never say God. Never ever say never to God. He takes that as a challenge, I promise you. And it's no challenge to God. So we get back into church and we think, and I feel like God is speaking to me, and I'm just going to tell you straight up, I had a dream. We were up in Palm Bay, Florida. We lived there for 2 years. 2 years, and we would go to church, and I hated it. You know why? Because every time I went to church, I saw people serving in ministry, and I knew I was called to do that, and I wasn't doing it. I hated it. And then God says, it's time for you to get back to doing what I called you to do. It's time for the dream to come to life. Fine. And that's where God led us to this church. And you know the story. We were sitting in the back row. 3 months later, we became the senior pastors. I wish to say that the trials ended there. But God spoke to us and said, this will be the hardest thing you've ever done. It'll be the biggest battle you ever fought. But it's worth it. If you can't see the fruit that we're actually seeing through battle, Recovery Church alone is amazing fruit right now. But we've also seen the fruit in many of your lives. And when God has given us a dream, you know what? I've not only had the dream of a beginning, I've had the dream of the end for me. And this is like, you know what, son? If you stay the course and you become the person I've called you to be, you will see this one day. And in the dream, I was an old man being led by the hand, and I had a cane, and I was old. But I felt like I was in heaven, which is weird. And all of a sudden, I was led into this area, and people were on these cliffs and mountains overlooking, and I saw thousands of people, and they all just looked at me and just nodded. And I asked God, I said, what is this? He said, those are the people that I will use you to reach if you stay the course. Does that mean I'm going to preach in front of thousands of people? I don't know that. Maybe that just means that we're going to reach 5, and they're going to go after 100 each.
There you go.
Maybe we're just a small cog in the wheel, because no one cog can say they're any more important than the other. No one tooth can say they're any more important than the other. That's our journey. And there's going to be days you just want to give up. There's going to be days you don't want to fight the battle. There's going to be days where you're tired of everybody betraying you and abandoning you. And there's going to be days you want to take that hurt and carry it in a backpack, and then everything you see from that point forward is looking through those colored glasses. It affects how you see every situation. It affects, if you allow that bitterness into your heart, every time you come into a situation that feels familiar, you will lash out and you will miss the test. Every time. I've done it more than I can count. Every time we have trust broken in our lives, we have a hard time trusting. Every time we have love betrayed, we have a hard time loving. But I want to be a kind of a person that I can love like I've never been hurt, trust like it's never been broken. We have to. Everyone in here, if you don't know what you're called to do, it's time to find out. Because I don't care who you are, you're called. You are a dreamer, girl. And people have hated you for that. Because they don't understand. They don't understand, but you know. Sometimes you don't understand how it's going to happen. But he's doing it. There's more coming. If you're in this place and you feel like right now you have lost sight of the dream and vision that God has given you, or you don't know what that is, I'm going to want you to come up right now. Just come up right now. If you just need us to touch and agree for that dream to be revived in your life, we're going to do that right now. If you got some bitterness in your heart that you know is affecting how you see every situation from this day forward, it's time to get rid of it. It's time to get rid of it. Guys, can I get you to play something back there? Listen, I don't care what you've been through. It's not too hard of a thing for God to figure out. I'm going to pray a group prayer, and then I'm going to ask some of the people to come down, some of you come down, and we're going to pray. Father God, I'm going to ask right now that you just open our hearts to receive. Holy Spirit, speak to our hearts and uncover any kind of bitterness, Lord, if there's something we have done in the past that we have failed to test, bring it to heart. Show us. Lord God, I know there's times where you've shown me years later because I couldn't handle it at the time. Lord God, if there be dreams in this place that have been deflated, breathe your breath of life back into them. Show them that they are not dead, they are not gone, but you have a purpose and a plan in the process. If there be anybody in this place right now that you feel like God has betrayed you because things didn't work out the way you thought they should, Lord, let us deal with it. Let us deal with it. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord.